Hey there, I'm back with another video. It is 8:59 a.m., almost 9 o'clock. It is April 14th, Monday morning, and I am here making a video. I've been up for quite a while. I'm having some coffee, and of course, I'm making my plans for the day. So I wanted to come on here and make a video. It's important for me sometimes to talk out my feelings, and I know that sometimes I come off like a broken record because most of my rants and complaints are either, regurgitations of things that have already happened, and but it's something important because I never got proper closure. Like, I mean, I understand what happened, but I also feel as though, when it comes to compensation and some sort of, how do it's like when somebody does something wrong to you, the reason why you go to the court system is because you want to get compensation. Just like, if something happens where somebody, okay, kind of like, and I don't like to go on the spiritual or the religious thing, okay, like when they talk about eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, it's like if somebody did something to you, it is their responsibility to pay you back measure for measure. That's one of the reasons why I felt as though Rex Laverne should die, because I'm 54 years old, okay? That 12 years that he just, you know, arrogantly sucked up out of my life, it's like, really, he can't give that back to me. I mean, I know that I can live longer than 12 years, but thinking about the quality of life at the age I will be in 12 years, he cannot give me 12 years back. Aside from that, it's like, I understand that, he wrongfully wanted to put stipulations on where I would work, how I would work. And I understand there's a lot of human trafficking going on, okay? But really, the employment system is supposed to be designed to where you find the right foot, or you could look for the right fit, like, for example, finding the right work culture that you'd fit in, the kind of place that you'd rather go, instead of, these people putting in these covert operations to encourage employers to adapt to these ridiculous like work standards. I was really unhappy and still affected emotionally and psychologically by what Rex Laverne did. Okay, the very fact that I'm looking at my situation right now and the years that this person decided to take out of my life, all because he wanted to get some sort of leverage, or he wanted to use me and the spirit traveler, I guess the apparition, to get some sort of, social footing or whatever, however he used it. He could have been could have earned money off of it, or even either did it for social prestige or whatever. Okay, but in the meantime, while this man was ruining my life, I've gone, I've worked jobs that I felt were completely unfulfilling. Okay, and because I was unfulfilled there, I'd come home and I would be even more depressed. I mean, working under those conditions is a nightmare. It is a nightmare, okay? And it's also an indicator of human trafficking. But, what bothers me so much is when I think about how this man, along with the Mormon church, okay, uh, thought it was, their duty to ruin my life because of their misguided belief system, okay? Which obviously, and throughout my life, I never wanted anything to do with, okay? But, this is their perception and how of what, their takeover and their desire to have so much control over the lives of other people. And I had mentioned before how religion really should not come into play. It does not fit into employment decisions, and this is reflected in the law, both in federal law as well as the state law, which is going to be a part of my moral reset. Which, by the way, I'd like to talk about the moral reset. I think I'm going to have to extend my deadline maybe a week out further, mainly because of how I'm rearranging this whole project. So, I'm usually really good at deadlines, but I have to say that there has been times where I've had depression collapses. I resent the fact that these people had put something into place to where I felt as though I was so boxed in, unhappy, not being able to fully function. Your mood has everything to do with how you you go about your daily life. If your mood is feeling sad, there's going to be stagnation. There's going to be, and there's been times where, I would prefer to work on my project, but I still feel like really unhappy about the situation that this man caused me. You know what I mean? I realize, even now, I feel as though this man has made it so that my life journey has taken more steps back. Now, in my life, everybody has their ideas and their standards. And this is why I'm angry, because I have the right to set my own standards. I have the right to have my own personal views, and I have the right to protect those. This is one of the reasons why, I believe that the laws in this country are so great. Unfortunately, for people who are ignorant or people who ignore them, this is the kind of chaos that they create. Now, I raised my son. I was a single mom. Okay. Do I think that I've made mistakes as a parent? Of course. You know what I mean? I could have done better, but I think overall I did a good job. My son is polite, he's respectful, and I think that's important. Okay, and I love my son very much, very much. I mean, he's my life. Okay, but at his age, he's 31 years old, and I'm angry about the fact that they took up so much of my life. Meaning, the workplace mobbings when I was growing. You know, going from the very beginning. Okay, the schoolyard, then introducing themselves into the workplace, causing my problems year after year after year after year, and then me losing jobs, being put in these unemployment situations so they could take advantage of me even further. What bothers me about it is because now I see myself, and I look in the mirror and I can see that my hair is gray. Like, I can see how many years they sucked up my life. And what bothers me is I'm looking at my 31-year-old son, who also now has gray hair, right? And I do believe that, and I'm very grateful. Like, I want to tell you, when it comes to me being a parent, I'm a parent, and legally, I'm talking about the legal age of an adult. The legal age of an adult here in California, and the majority of the United States is usually about 18 years old. Okay, some places it could be 16, and then some places could be 21. Now, here in California, it's 18 years old. That means that once you're 18 years old, you can do, as long as it's within the guidelines of the law, you can go ahead and live on your own. You can be separated from your parents. You can adopt a different lifestyle from your parents. Like, some people complain, oh, I hate being at home. And I used to say things like that when I was a kid. And the first thing my parents would say is, when you're 18, you can do what you want. But until then, you live here. Okay? And I am very grateful and that I have a son. And it's always been my belief that no matter what happens, my son always has a place to stay. Meaning, like, if I am in a position to bring my son to live with me, I am definitely open to doing that. I believe in supporting my family because I love my family. Okay, that's a no-brainer. Okay, but legally, I have no obligation to my kid. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, I know growing up, there were a lot of people who just came flat out and said it. As a matter of fact, there were some people who threw their kids out of the house by the time they were 18. They already told them, by the time you're 18, I don't want you here. And so sometimes you have to question the motive as to why people have kids. Some people literally have kids so they can get some sort of welfare benefit or whatever. And then once the kid's no longer, it seems like that. Like, okay, after the kid's no longer useful to them, you're on your own. Okay, I've never been that way. Okay, and as a single parent, I had never had any intentions of using my kid for financial gain. Even though I did receive, welfare benefits when he was really young. But my main goal was to always have a job and support. And once I got myself a job and was off of those benefits, I couldn't tell you how happy I was, because my goal was to always support my son as my own. Okay, on my own. But, I understand that, this particular network, which worked covertly, do I believe that my son living with me is a part of their operation? I do. I do. And, that angers me, because one thing that I want as a parent who loves their child and understands the importance of life and the enjoyment and the fulfillment of life. All I ever wanted was my son to be able to live a life where it did not have to resemble mine, to where he was going to be able to live his life the way that he wanted to. And I understand my son, enjoys things like camping. He likes to go, to places like San Francisco, or he likes to go, to other locations here in the United States and even other countries. Okay, my son deserves to have a better life than what I have. Okay, so he ended up moving in with me a while ago. Okay, and it's been nice having him here, and I'm very grateful. Okay, but it still angers me looking at my son who's 31 years old and having his life, the quality of his life, reduced because of somebody's religious belief that's not mine. Do I also believe that this person was, this particular group that was working covertly was perhaps wanting my son to live with me so that my son could be some sort of informant against my will and introducing this sort of toxicity into my home? Do I suspect that? Yeah, I do. And do I find it offensive? Yes, I do. Because like I said, I live my life to protect myself from what goes on the outside. And I believe that Rex Laverne, he overstepped that. He really went beyond. And so when I think about life progressing in life, okay, I am angry that my son is 31 years old, and because they ruined my life, I feel as though they have affected his life by the fact that he's living with his mom. Now, like I said, I will always support my son. He always has a place to go. But ideally, that is not something that I want for my child. I want my child to live the life that he wants to live. Meaning, I want him to be around and do the things that he wants to do, be around the people that he wants to be with. And don't get me wrong, I love being around my son, but he's 31 years old and he has his own life. Okay, so it breaks my heart that my son has his life and the quality of his life reduced, all because somebody did not like the fact that I was a woman living by themselves. Okay, and mind you, I don't even really do anything. I pretty much go when my son was here, wasn't living with me. It was the same thing: go to work, come home. And when I was on my downtime, same thing. I'd go to the store, come home, work on some arts. I mean, I don't do anything. Okay, but whatever the case is, I have the right to live on my own. I have the right to live on my own. And what angered me so much is that, this particular religious takeover, which is, a violation of my rights as an American citizen, is offensive to me. You know what I mean? And I understand that Rex Laverne is dead, but right now I wish I could see him die over and over and over again. Why? Because he has affected not just my life, but he's affected my son's life. Okay, it's like you've affected two generations. And see, because I understand that Mormons have this like vendetta, okay, they had a vendetta against me because I guess they wanted me to become a Mormon. Okay, and I believe that there's peace between me and the Mormon faith, okay, and I want to keep it that way. But I do not want to ever, religion really is not my thing. And I'm angry that somebody went this far to try to, to try to impose that on me. Okay, and it hurts me that I was targeted, but it hurts me even more knowing that this affected my son. Because I will tell you what, as 31 years old, I would not want to be living with my mom. At 31 years old, you're young enough to still have a little bit more of a venture, still a little bit young enough to enjoy your life a little bit more. And I feel as though, this knowing Rex Laverne or having this person in my life just reduced the quality of my life. I cannot tell you how glad I am that man's dead. I have absolutely no remorse. And usually it's like, I don't feel anything for this person except for disgust. You know what I mean? And that's how I feel. And that's how I feel like when I woke up this morning. That was the first thing that was on my mind, my being angry. He was the idea, perhaps maybe this was because of the Mormonism or maybe the whole white supremacist thing or whatever, but, he did not want me to have women to have employment without being married. That right there is outright against the law. That is against the law, and they should know that. You know what I mean? There are women, like I said, the reason why I am somebody who is very protective of my space is because I've dealt with abuse my entire life. And so what this man did was he was basically insisting upon me being in an abusive situation. I don't think we should grant her employment until she settles down. I told people I'm afraid of people. I do not want to have anyone, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. You know what I mean? And I'm all by myself. I don't have, a structure to where, like, let's just say, for example, a girl is married, right? And her husband's abusing her. She can go back to her parents' house. She can go back to her siblings' house. She can have, she has a support system. I don't have a support system. I don't have a support system. So the only person I can watch out for is me. And some people say, well, I mean, I could be somebody who relies on my kid, but you know what? I don't believe in doing that. That's my personal belief. Because in my belief system, I'm an independent person and I'm responsible for my own life. And each person has their life journey. And I am not somebody who wants to sit here and impede on my son's life journey. I want my son to be happy. I want my son to have a life of his own. And that's something I clearly stated. I've always believed this way. Okay? I never wanted my son to sit here and have to take care of me. I did not raise my kid to take care of me. Now, there are times where people, they pull together as a family or whatever. And I will tell you, like I said, if something was to happen to my son where he needed me to be, of course, you know what I mean? But able-bodied people should stand on their own. This is my belief. If you're able-bodied, you need to stand on your own. Because I don't believe in being a burden to anybody. That's my belief. You know what I mean? And I have a right to believe that. And I have the right to take care of myself. You know what I mean? And we have these like pig-headed people. Well, she's a woman and we're going to make sure. No. Okay. I have to be, it's like, it makes me angry. I have no reason. Legally, I have no right to explain my stance to anyone. Okay. And he sat here and made this big issue and went into this whole like campaign, and these people did what they did to me, and it just angers me. It angers me like you don't even know. You know what I mean? And me and my son, I love my son, okay, but we are different. We are different too. It's like I'm meticulous about wanting to be clean. I know that this apartment is only so big. We have stuff in here. It's crowded in here. Okay, but aside from that, it's like I'm angry because this man and the employment practices, okay, it's just it's a feeling of, and I've heard other people say it, okay, because obviously, like I said, this whole thing about the removal of the DEI policies with a lot of companies has spread throughout the United States, okay. Meanwhile, while I was talking about this the entire time, it wasn't being taken seriously. I have seen so many videos of women talking about this. You know what I mean? And I will tell you that the quality of life for so many people has been significantly reduced by these abusive people. Okay? It's like, I feel like I used to love looking for work. Like, I used to. Because I understood, like, 8 hours a day, that was determined to make that the best time of my life. Seriously. Okay? I know when it comes to looking for work, people do. I mean, people should have, the ability to say, okay, well, I'm looking for a specific kind of work culture. You know what I mean? This is one reasons why people, such as people who do go to like the entire 4-year degree program, they're trying to avoid having to go to a job that they dread, right? But these people are still end up, being trafficked to some nightmare place, which to me is a tragedy because when you think about it, these people are paying to be enslaved. They're not enjoying any benefit of that. They're not getting anything out of it, and but my point is that work life has become a nightmare. It has become an absolute nightmare, and it gives people the feeling like there's nothing, nothing positive in life. Okay, I had these people who wanted to initiate, the over control. I know Rex Laverne was complaining about the office supplies that I bought for myself, like, the tissue box, the little wall hangings and stuff like that, making my little office space, a nice place. Now, I've never heard too many people complain about that except this person, or maybe this particular group likes to inflict misery on people. To me, if I was a business owner, I would want my employees to be well adjusted, and I would want them to enjoy their job. When people enjoy things, you get more out of them. You get more out of people when they enjoy their job. This is the truth, okay? Like, there's been times where I felt so energetic, where I literally didn't mind staying after work. you know, without anybody having to tell me, you know, because I was content where I was, you know what I mean? I'm content with the little activity that I'm doing at the time. I'm content with my space. I'm totally happy, right? Some people they like over control of what micromanaging type situations, to where many people have complained about this, and it really does demoralize people. It makes them lose energy. It makes them lose enthusiasm. And don't get me wrong. I mean, as a business owner or manager or whatever, it's your responsibility to flow. I mean, uh, to direct the workflow. Okay, but I also understand that it's important to keep up morale, and their methods of doing that are just absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable. You know what I mean? So I did look for work this weekend. I went. I will not look for work in my house. Okay. I do not. I like have this whole thing about disassociating work, and anything that's work related, because it is a deep trauma for me. I really feel as though everything that has happened has made me want to disassociate from work life matters. Right. So I went to the library and I, you know, submitted some of my resumes or whatever. And so, and it was just like very disturbing to me, very depressing to me. And then I come home and then you know, I have to sit here and readjust myself, because even going to things like Indeed.com is a trigger for me. It really is. It is a big trigger for me. Okay, and people should not have to be triggered or have some sort of emotional problem or breakdowns for looking for a job. It should be a normal thing. Okay, but because of their foolishness of, you know, so I guess you call it cyberbullying or luring or whatever in the previous years or whatever that they've done, it has caused me a lot of psychological problems. And the fact that it wasn't just a joke, okay, these stupid job ads that they were posting and these stupid interviews that they put me into. And then the very fact that the last time I left my last job, while I was looking to employ myself or make some money, they outright thought it was their right to do that, to intercede, and then put me in a situation to where now I don't have a car, which is, you know, this is one of the indicators of human trafficking, you know, and I am adding human trafficking, a little bit about human trafficking in the moral reset. Now, the moral reset, like I said, I'm extending the deadline a little bit longer, mainly because of I wanted to add the negative negative behavioral traits and provide definitions for them. And I also want to talk about the different agencies a little bit more, like, for example, domestic violence shelters. You know, I want to bring up certain current issues that people might uh, go through, or concerns that they might have, and want to know, you know, and make sure that these things are actually taking place. And if they're not, suggesting things that might help people in this situation, such as confidentiality, and then, you know, maybe even taking things further if possible. And for these people to consider, these organizations to consider, you know, what people really need. And of course, you know, I don't want this to be very long, because, you know, the idea of the moral reset is to have it circulated through um, throughout the California, for starters. Okay, I mean, I would like this to be taken seriously everywhere, but it can't be like, you know, the size of a old fashioned phone book. Like, it can't be thick, it can't be that big. It has to be short, concise, and to the point, and, you know, be able to be an easy reference for people. So it's about, you know, making sure that everything is, you know, just right. I do want to go back to work, and I'm hoping that the work, what do you call it? The office life is not going to be a nightmare for me ever again, or anyone else. You know, I hope that this never happens to another human being. I can't tell you how evil and how awful it makes a person feel. But like I said, you know, given the mindset of why people did this, like, I do believe that the Mormon Church was after me because of just the fact that there was some sort of vendetta, the very fact that it has something to do with bloodline targeting. But like I said, I did exit in 1956. I committed suicide in 1956. So the fact that they brought me back in 1971 to me is just mind shattering. And only to bring me back to nothing. To nothing. Because I think that this organization has reduced the quality of life for a lot of people with their desire to shape the world the way that they want it to be. And I'm very glad that I'm talking more about religion and how it enters into politics. I mean, into, government decisions, because it should have never done that. It should have never done that, and I was thinking today, actually yesterday, as I was, because there's three portions to the Life Student Project. I'm not going to go too deeply into it in the moral reset, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in laying Pathways to Excellence, okay? Pathways to Excellence is talking about reshaping the school curriculum. And I'm going to talk briefly about the different forms of education. Right now we have public education, we have private education, and we have the homeschoolers, okay? Now, I'm thinking about how is the world that we could have access to the same information, yet, like, for example, just using this Mormon thing as an example, how is it that they could orchestrate this sort of things, or not know that the United States was not meant to be, the United States was set up to have separation between church and state, meaning, the country is not ruled based off of religion, okay? Still has morals, it's just not based on religion. And the reason why is it's made that way is so that people can have peace. To have somebody define who God is to another person and force them into those sort of situations, that's no different than slavery, and it's even worse. It's like somebody dictating how you're supposed to think about those things. That's a very personal thing. So my thing is, it's like it has a lot to do with the curriculum. Like, for example, in private schools, for example, when I was younger, I remember babysitting this kid, right? And this kid was like, we were talking about praying before you eat, right? Praying before you eat. And as he was doing this, he started reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And I kept thinking that this kid was confused because he probably was raised in a family where both God as well as his country were supposed to be upheld and respected, okay? So he was confused, and he was thinking that by praying and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, that both are definitely important, but he sees them as one and the same when they're two separate things, okay? Obviously, he should have respect for God, and he should have respect for the country, but they're not the same thing, right? When it comes to Mormons, perhaps, maybe, I'm trying to figure out how in the world they didn't know this, and if they did know this, right, that the United States was supposed to be separate from church and state, then they were doing this as some sort of deliberate takeover. The very fact that it's a covert operation makes me, very suspicious of this. Okay, and like I said, I'm having peace with the Mormons, but my point is, it's like, I want to make sure this doesn't happen again, and everything should be a learning experience. Now, I don't know, I have never been to BYU, I'm referring to Brigham Young University, or any other of their private schooling, learning institutions. I'm wondering, like, when it comes to civics, when it comes to understanding history and stuff, what does their books look like? Now, do Mormons only study about the Mormon contributions that were made in government? You know what I mean? Like, when they're studying their textbooks and learning about the history of our country, are they only learning about the Mormons? You know what I mean? And is it in their mind is it confused in their minds to that where Mormons set the tone for what laws get initiated in this country, to where they either assumed that you have to be Mormon in this country, or the Mormons should be running the country in some way? What made them believe this? What made them think this? Okay, maybe they only talk about Mormons who've been a part of the government or whatever. Maybe that's all they talk about. If this is the case, in order for this not to happen, Mormons need to, perhaps should, study the accomplishments and the contributions that Mormons have made in government, but they also need to talk about how the government is really established, because, and so that they understand from both sides that not everybody is Mormon. Okay, I mean, I want to know what about their curriculum shaped their worldview of what made this way. You know, I understand that some people talk about, you know, debating certain textbooks because it could be leaning one way. Just like I know I went to school, for example, I went to school, right, in the school system, and in history, we learned very little about Black history. We learned very little about the contributions of the Native Americans. We learned very little about those sort of things, okay? But we learned more about the contributions of white people. And I'm not complaining, it is what it is, okay? But just the same using the same idea and the same principle, maybe they talk so much about Mormons when it comes to things like history and civics, that they don't really talk about the other important people here in the United States. You know, for example, people who focused on the First Amendment. Did they talk about the First Amendment? And did people from BYU even know what that is? You know, exactly what is it that they're learning to where they thought that this was okay. To me, they must have known that it was not okay. Otherwise, it would not have been a covert operation. They wouldn't be doing this behind the scenes. Okay, but when it comes to things that relate to government, law, even history, because, you know, I remember learning about the freedoms of the United States, our freedoms here, going back in grade school. Okay, and I remember my parents talking about that. Like, I remember we had a few Asian people in the neighborhood, right? And I remember my sister was saying, oh, they could be Buddhist or whatever, and my parents were saying, it doesn't matter what they are. You know, God, people have the right to see God however they want to. And then the first thing that they used to justify what they said was, we have freedom of religion here in this country, right? So it was like, okay, let's back off these people. And it's not that we were criticizing them or anything like that. It's just that we were wondering, like, okay, where are they coming from? But my point is that my parents always referred to, you know, history, the laws, whatever. We always referred to the law and things that were already established here. That was our reference point, okay? And perhaps it's different for the learning curriculum is different for Mormons. Perhaps, maybe. I would like to know, you know what I mean? And maybe I will have time to dig into exactly what they study, but it really boils down to, you know, not everybody sees things the way that they do, but I would be interested in knowing exactly what they cover when it comes to those subject matters. Anyway, and I think it does matter, because like I said, you know, Mormons have every right to be a part of Congress or whatever. They have the right to do that, okay? But as far as making decisions, they have to be able to think about everybody. You know what I mean? Everybody, it's inclusive, you know, and it's not just exclusive to their particular religion. And this is where the danger comes, you know. I was just thinking, because I remember when I was growing up, you know, I don't know if Mormons are more flexible about the caffeine issue, but let's just say, for example, when I was growing up, I knew a lot of Mormon people who just did not believe in drinking coffee. They did not believe in having caffeine. So let's just say, for example, we had this, you know, Mormons were just inflicting their beliefs on everybody and decided to remove coffee out of the stores. People would have a shit fit. I know I would. I'd go crazy if somebody just said, well, we're going to get rid of coffee. But see, that's my point. It's an example of somebody, you know, creating a world based off of their belief system and how that affects everyone else. Okay, that's just one little example. Anyway, is there anything else I wanted to say? I wanted to say a few shout outs. I want to say hello to Eric Clapton. I did notice that, you know, some of these people reached out to me on Messenger, and this was after the fact. I usually notice after the fact. If I don't respond to you, please understand that I'm not doing it on purpose or trying to be rude. You know what it is? It's just me fearing being overstimulated by some of the things I've experienced online. So I want to say hello to Eric Clapton. I also want to say hello to Neil Diamond. I also want to say hello to Cher. I have this fascination with Cher, and I've always loved Cher. Okay, and I don't know, perhaps, I don't know. I know that my mother is a celebrity, and I know growing up, I've seen Cher with my mother, my biological mother, in several pictures. I've also seen them on talk shows growing up, and so when it comes to Cher, I don't know. I mean, who's to say? I've been thinking about my fascination with her since I was a kid. I don't, who's to say? I might have met her when I was really little. I ended up being with the Gordon family around 3 years old. Okay, I was 3 years old when I moved in with the Gordon family. Who's to say? The reason why I remember like being so mesmerized by her when I was a kid. I don't know. Maybe I did. I don't know. I don't know what my connection is with her, but I've always liked looking at her, and I always liked her style and stuff like that. Okay, what else do I want to talk about? Trying to look through. That's pretty much it. I just wanted to say hello to those people. Yes, I do want to say hello to Elon Musk. I did send him a text, and it's been a while. He kind of responds whenever he can and whatever. He seems like a very busy dude. But okay, I'm gonna wrap this up. I just want to share this, what was going through my mind, because I hope this doesn't ever happen to someone else again, and I hope that people will recognize the signs of this sort of thing. I was looking through different videos because I want videos to explain the negative personality, behavioral traits. Okay, negative behavioral traits. I wanted something, videos for that, right? And a lot of these videos to me are okay, they are longer than, because it's really hard to describe certain personality traits to where people would get a good idea of it in just under 5 minutes. Okay, but I'm still looking for videos that are very cut and dry. If you are a content creator, and if you understand anything about psychology and want to make educational videos for my project, okay, if you could make them and somehow upload, and if you're friends with me on Facebook, if you could upload them on Facebook or somehow make it so that I can see them, because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm looking through videos and trying to use educational videos as a part of my presentation. I would make them myself. It's just that, I don't really have the time. And I also want to talk about, touch this issue on, my mood. Okay. Like I said, your mood is everything. I remember growing up, having managers and bosses, they were very detached. They always cared only about getting the work done. And sometimes they would just come out and say, I don't care how you feel, blah, 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 blah. That is the worst thing you can ever have. And if you ever have a manager that says that, there's something wrong with them. Okay. How you feel makes all the difference in the world. The reason why I'm running behind on my project is because I feel like shit a lot. Okay, because I feel like I'm low motivation, stagnant, not really. And a lot of people right now, I've heard a lot of these people's videos, they don't feel like they have anything to care about. They don't have any. And when you start feeling like there's nothing to care about, this is where it all goes downhill from there. How you feel matters, okay? That was, to me, the old school form of management. The very abusive, uncaring, cold type. And don't get me wrong, that's not to say that they should sit here and coddle employees. That's not what I'm saying, okay? But we all know how our mental health, nowadays, I would say mental health is more highlighted, and the understanding of it is more appreciated. How you feel is everything. It is the truth, okay? You could sit here and walk around, you're around your house and not do your dishes, or you could, let important things slip and get away from you because you don't feel like it. Do I believe that laziness is actually a result of hopelessness? I think a lot of times laziness and the feeling of being lethargic are indeed feelings of hopelessness. I really do. People who just give up on life. And people give up on life mainly because they don't have the right mental condition. And it's our responsibility to find the right mental condition. This is one of the reasons why I like my little coffee cup. This is one of the reasons why I like my office decorations. I like my little nifty things because they help lift my mood. You know what I mean? I enjoy arts and crafts. I enjoy my clothes. These things help my mood. If your mood matters, how you feel matters. You know what I mean? And I don't want to work for an employer that wants to just completely disregard that. So anyway, I think that's all I really wanted to say. I'm going to wrap this video up. I think I've said enough. So I will be back with another video sometime later. Take care. Bye-bye.